heart of a quaint little town stood an old, decrepit house that had long been abandoned. The locals whispered tales of its dark past, of tragic events that had unfolded within its walls. But the most chilling story of all was that of the daughter doll, a doll said to be possessed by the spirit of a young girl who had met a tragic end. Years ago, the house belonged to my family, the Thompsons. We were a happy family, or so it seemed, until tragedy struck. Our daughter, Lily, went missing one stormy night, never to be seen again. The grief-stricken parents searched high and low for our beloved daughter, but to no avail. In the midst of our despair, a mysterious package arrived at our doorstep, a beautiful porcelain doll, an exact replica of Lily. The doll bore an eerie resemblance to our missing daughter, from her curly golden locks to her piercing blue eyes. But there was something unsettling about the doll, something that sent shivers down our spines. Despite our unease, my grieving parents welcomed the doll into our home, hoping it would bring them some semblance of comfort. But as the days passed, strange things began to happen. Objects would go missing only to reappear in odd places, strange noises echoed through the house at night, and the temperature would inexplicably drop. At first, we dismissed these occurrences as figments of our imagination, the product of our grief-stricken minds. But soon, we could no longer deny the truth. The doll was alive, possessed by the spirit of our daughter. My parents tried everything to rid the doll of its malevolent presence. They consulted priests, shamans, and even tried to destroy the doll, but nothing worked. The doll seemed to have a mind of its own, a sinister will that could not be subdued. As time went on, the doll's presence grew more sinister. It would move on its own accord, its eyes following anyone who dared to enter the room. Some claimed to hear the doll whispering in the dead of night, calling out for its lost owner. Rumors of the haunted doll spread throughout the town, and soon, nobody dared to go near our old Thompson house. But one brave soul, a curious young girl named Sophia, was determined to uncover the truth behind the legend. Ignoring the warnings of the townsfolk, Sophia ventured into the abandoned house, her heart pounding with fear. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay as she made her way through the darkened halls. And then, she saw it, the daughter doll, sitting alone in the corner of the room, its eyes glinting in the dim light. Approaching the doll cautiously, her hands trembling with fear, Sophia reached out to touch it. But as she did, the doll's eyes seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. And then, in a voice that sent chills down her spine, it spoke. "Help me," it whispered, its voice a ghostly echo of Lily's. "Please help me." Sophia recoiled in horror, her mind reeling with terror. She knew then that the stories were true. The daughter doll was indeed possessed by the spirit of Lily Thompson, trapped for all eternity in her porcelain prison. With a scream, Sophia fled from the house, vowing never to return. And as she ran, she could swear she heard the faint sound of a child's laughter echoing through the empty halls, a chilling reminder of the haunted doll that lurked within. Deep within the dense embrace of ancient woods, there stood a forsaken village, its secrets buried beneath layers of shadow and silence. There lived a boy named Damien. Damien was unlike the other children in the town. While they played in the streets and attended Sunday school, Damien's interests lay in darker realms. He was fascinated by tales of the occult, drawn to the forbidden knowledge that whispered through the shadows. As Damien grew older, his fascination turned into obsession. He spent hours poring over ancient tomes, deciphering cryptic symbols, and delving into rituals meant to summon otherworldly entities. His parents, devout Christians, watched with growing concern as their son became more and more withdrawn, his once bright eyes now clouded with a dark intensity. But Damien paid them no heed. He was on a quest for power, a hunger burning deep within his soul, and he knew that the key to unlocking that power lay in making a pact with the devil himself. One moonless night, Damien ventured deep into the woods, following the instructions he had gleaned from his forbidden texts. He reached a clearing bathed in an eerie, otherworldly glow, where a figure stood waiting for him. A figure cloaked in shadows, with eyes that burned like hellfire. With trembling hands, Damien recited the ancient incantations, offering his soul in exchange for untold power and knowledge. And as the last words fell from his lips, the figure smiled, a smile that chilled Damien to the bone. From that moment on, Damien's life took a dark and twisted turn. He wielded powers beyond his wildest dreams, commanding dark forces to do his bidding. But with each spell he cast, he could feel his humanity slipping away, replaced by something cold and malevolent. The townsfolk whispered tales of strange happenings, crops withering in the fields, livestock falling ill, and children disappearing in the dead of night. They knew that Damien was behind it all, but they were powerless to stop him. As the years passed, Damien's power grew, but so too did his isolation. He became a shadow of his former self, a mere vessel for the dark forces that now controlled him. And yet, deep down, a flicker of humanity remained, a tiny voice crying out in the darkness, begging for release. But Damien ignored it, reveling in his newfound power, until one fateful night, when he received an unexpected visitor. A visitor with a proposition that would change everything. The visitor was none other than the devil himself, come to collect on Damien's debt. With a wave of his hand, Damien was consumed by hellfire, his screams echoing through the night as he was dragged down into the depths of the underworld, never to be seen again. And as the flames died down and the forest fell silent once more, the townsfolk breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that the darkness that had plagued their town for so long was finally gone. But little did they know that Damien's pact with the devil was only the beginning of something far more sinister.
In the outskirts of the small town of Ravenswood, New Hampshire, there lies an old, forgotten road known by the locals as Whispering Lane. Once a bustling route, the road fell into disrepair after a series of strange and tragic events, becoming overgrown and abandoned. The townsfolk avoided it, passing down chilling tales of the lady on the abandoned road, a ghostly figure said to haunt the area. It was early October, and the crisp autumn air filled the town with a sense of foreboding. Ravenswood High School seniors had a tradition of testing their courage by venturing down Whispering Lane on Halloween night. This year, it was the turn of two brothers, Sam and Luke Thompson. Sam, the older of the two, had always been protective of his younger brother Luke, who was both nervous and excited about the challenge. "Come on, Luke, it's just an old road," Sam said, trying to sound confident as they stood at the entrance to Whispering Lane. The thick forest loomed ahead, the trees swaying ominously in the evening breeze. "Yeah, but what about the stories?" Luke replied, his voice shaky. "They say she appears at midnight and takes people." Sam, always the skeptic, rolled his eyes. "Ghost stories to scare kids. We're seniors now. Time to prove there's nothing to be afraid of." Luke nodded, trying to muster his courage. "Let's just do this and get it over with." With flashlights in hand, they began their trek down the abandoned road. The air grew colder, and an unnatural silence enveloped them, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. The road was narrow and overgrown, the cracked pavement barely visible under the encroaching vegetation. As they walked, Luke couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He glanced over his shoulder repeatedly, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness but revealing nothing. He tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the banter between him and his brother. "Remember the story?" Sam said, breaking the silence. "A woman in white, wandering the road, looking for her lost child. They say she died in a car accident, searching for her kid." "Yeah, but it wasn't just any accident," Luke added. "She swerved to avoid hitting something and crashed into a tree. They never found her child, though." Sam scoffed. "Just stories. We'll be fine." As they ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere grew thicker, more oppressive. The trees seemed to close in around them, and the once clear path became increasingly difficult to navigate. Their flashlights flickered, the batteries seemingly drained by the eerie surroundings. "Did you hear that?" Luke whispered, his voice barely audible. "Hear what?" Sam asked, stopping and turning to face him. A whisper, like someone calling for help. The brothers fell silent, straining to hear any sound beyond their own breathing. And then, faintly, they heard it. A soft, mournful cry, carried by the wind. "Help me, please." "That's creepy," Luke said, his eyes wide with fear. "Probably just the wind," Sam insisted, though his bravado seemed to falter. They continued walking, but the sense of unease grew stronger. The cries became more distinct, more desperate. Luke's heart pounded in his chest, every instinct telling him to turn back, but the brothers pressed on, driven by a mix of curiosity and pride. Suddenly, the beam of Luke's flashlight caught something white up ahead. A figure stood in the middle of the road, illuminated by the pale light. It was a woman, dressed in a flowing white gown, her hair cascading over her shoulders. Her face was obscured by shadows, but her eyes seemed to glow with an unnatural light. Who are you?" Sam called out, his voice trembling. The woman did not respond. Instead, she raised a hand and beckoned them forward. "Please, help me find my child," she said, her voice echoing through the trees. Sam stepped forward, his skepticism giving way to a strange compulsion. "We can help," he said, almost as if in a trance. "Sam, no!" Luke shouted, grabbing his arm. "We need to leave, now!" But it was too late. The woman began to glide towards them, her movements unnaturally smooth and silent. The temperature dropped sharply, and a sense of dread washed over the brothers. "We have to go," Luke pleaded, his eyes filling with tears. The woman in white continued to approach, her expression shifting from sorrow to something far more sinister. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice now cold and hollow. "Forever." Panic set in, and the brothers turned to flee. As they ran, the forest seemed to come alive, branches reaching out to snare them, roots tripping them up. The once familiar path twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the woods instead of towards safety. Luke glanced back and saw the woman in white floating after them, her face twisted in a grotesque grin. He could hear her voice in his mind, urging him to stop, to give in. Desperation fueled their flight, but the forest seemed to conspire against them. Sam tripped over a root and fell, twisting his ankle. "I can't run," he gasped, clutching his leg. "Come on, we have to keep moving," Luke shouted, trying to help Sam to his feet. But the woman was closing in, her outstretched hand nearly touching Sam. "Join me," she whispered, her voice now a chilling command. In a burst of adrenaline, Luke grabbed a fallen branch and swung it at the apparition. To their surprise, it passed through her, but she recoiled, as if struck by an unseen force. "Run!" Luke screamed. With Sam limping between them, they managed to break free of the forest's grip and stumbled back onto the main road. The haunting cries faded behind them, replaced by the sound of their own labored breathing. They didn't stop until they reached the safety of their home, collapsing onto the porch in a heap. What was that?" Sam panted, his face pale. "The lady on the abandoned road," Luke whispered, his eyes wide with terror. "She's real." The experience left them shaken, their bravado shattered. They had come face to face with the ghostly figure that haunted Whispering Lane and barely escaped with their lives. The legend was no longer a story to them. It was a terrifying reality. In the days that followed, the brothers struggled to come to terms with what they had witnessed. The townsfolk, upon hearing their tale, were both horrified and vindicated. The lady on the abandoned road was real, and her spirit still roamed the forgotten path, searching for lost souls to join her in eternal sorrow. Despite their ordeal, curiosity gnawed at Luke. He spent hours researching the legend, determined to understand the origins of the ghostly figure. He discovered that the woman in white, was named Eleanor, a grieving mother who had lost her child in a tragic accident on Whispering Lane over a century ago. Consumed by guilt and sorrow, Eleanor had wandered the road in search of her child until the day she died in a car crash. Luke found an old photograph of Eleanor, and chills ran down his spine. The resemblance to the apparition they had encountered was unmistakable. Eleanor's story was one of profound tragedy, and her restless spirit continued to haunt the road where her life had ended. Haunted by their encounter, Sam and Luke vowed never to return to Whispering Lane. They warned others to stay away, hoping to prevent further tragedies. But deep down, Luke knew that the legend of the lady on the abandoned road would endure, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked in the forgotten corners of their town. One evening, months after their harrowing experience, Luke received a mysterious package. Inside was an old, weathered diary that had belonged to Eleanor. The final entry, written in a shaky hand, read, "I cannot rest until I find my child. I am bound to this road, forever searching, forever lost." As Luke closed the diary, he felt a cold breeze brush against his skin. He glanced out the window, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he saw a figure in white standing at the edge of the forest. But when he blinked, it was gone. The lady on the abandoned road remained a chilling presence in Ravenswood, a ghostly figure eternally bound to her tragic past. And for Sam and Luke, the memory of that fateful night served as a grim reminder that some legends are all too real, and some spirits are never truly at rest. Despite their efforts to warn others, the lure of Whispering Lane's dark mystery continued to draw the curious and the brave. And each year, as Halloween approached, the tale of the lady on the abandoned road resurfaced, a sinister whisper carried by the wind, reminding all who heard it that some roads are best left untraveled.